Welcome to the Owl Hoot podcast with me, Caroline Norbury. This is a show for any person interested in the environment and sustainability. I arrived at a point in my own life where I wanted to know more about the state of our planet and how I can play my part, albeit small, in mitigating climate change, reducing pollution and supporting biodiversity. I decided that chatting to others who are already doing something might be a good place to start. So each episode will feature a different guest telling their stories in and around an environmental activity that will perhaps provide you with ideas that you can incorporate into your own life. Enjoy listening and let me know if you have a topic you'd like to hear more about on the podcast, and I'll do my best to address it. I am delighted that my very first episode of the podcast is with John Grant, Senior Lecturer in Sustainable Construction and Climate Change at Sheffield Hallam University. In addition to teaching sustainable planning, environmental impact assessment and wider environmental issues, John is working on a PhD studying sustainable responses to the projected effects of climate change on the UK housing stock. He's been a regular guest on BBC Radio Sheffield, is an aquaponics enthusiast and a member of Extinction Rebellion. Today, we're specifically addressing our homes and buildings, and I'm looking forward to extracting John's wisdom on how we can make them more energy efficient. So enough from me, let's get right into it. Welcome, John, to the podcast.
Thank you very much. That all sounded a little long-winded there. I can't believe I do all of that. But yeah, that's kind of me, I guess.
So thinking about you and how you got into all things environmental, it wasn't always like this. How did you go from, as a child, what were you interested in? You went into town planning. Tell me a bit about that and how you landed in the sort of environmental scene.
Well, I grew up on a council estate in Sheffield. My mum was a dinner lady, my dad a steel worker, but actually that sort of hides the idea that they were immigrants from India and both quite middle class. So both privately educated, but emigrated over here in 56. So education was incredibly sort of important to them. But I got that real mix of kind of middle class attitude, but growing up in a working class area where my mum told me that I wasn't allowed to have a Yorkshire accent, even though it slips in now and then. That was not allowed. She was very wise. She sort of like said, "You're not white, John, and if you've got a Yorkshire accent as well, that's two things that they'll pick you up on." So, she was all for the agenda. I can't deny, and I grew up in that area, and it was kind of rough, and I could see the effects of kind of drugs and poverty and all of these other issues, poor education on my area, and it was kind of my agenda that I'd make things better. And in my head, I thought, right, I'm going to be a police officer, and I'm going to save the world one crime at a time. That was my agenda, and I thought to do that, I'm going to get a degree, and I'm going to, because it speeds up your promotion or something. Sure. It was that thing. And so I decided, I was quite good at geography. I really loved studying people and everything, and the physical geography as well, the science and geology. And so I thought, you people don't do this, people listening to this. But I literally ripped out the geography section of my UCAS booklet, threw it in the air, and town planning ended up on the top, right? Because I didn't care what degree I wanted, because I had an agenda. I was just using the degree. Okay. So it was like something I was going to be interested in. And that's why town planning was on top. And so I never told my mum this. I just picked that and sent my application into that and went to Leeds Poly to do town planning. And in 1988, give away my age, I came across, thanks to my best friend, she introduced me to this video her research was on more environment. I was an environmentalist. I was going to be a copper, right? I was an environmentalist. So, and she said, "John, you've got to see this." And it was the presentation to the Senate by Jim Hansen where he says, I'm head of NASA. I'm paraphrasing it. He's much more eloquent than me. I'm head of NASA. I've been studying the atmosphere of Mars. I've turned my research straight onto the Earth, and I am 100% confident that humans are making the world warmer, and that's not a good thing. We need to do something about it. And I heard this, and then the world responded in a positive way by starting the Rio Earth Summit, and the biggest gathering of governments followed in the year. And I went, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. I can not just save the world one crime at a time, I can do it all at once. That's got to be more efficient. And so, I, with my best friend, we did a postgrad in environmental management and environmental systems at Reading University. And so, that sort of focus, I told you she was the environmentalist. And so I just went into that, and I did my first serious research project in 1991 on sustainable communities, zero carbon communities. And that was with my supervisor for the government. It was research that was funded by the government back then. We came up with all the baseline data as to what it would take to make a community zero carbon. What's the optimum size? What transport infrastructure? What energy production? What energy efficiency of your buildings? All of that kind of thing. And that's and you can have a look at it at Reading University if you want. My MPhil is probably on the shelf there, I suppose. And so we nailed it. That was it. Victory. We just had to roll it out. And got a couple of jobs, eventually got a job and eventually sort of got a research job at Sheffield Hallam University, which was being funded by the European Union back then when we were part of the Union. And it was the 100 zero carbon cities. So you can see how I got the research place, because I'd done this previous research. And that was a research project where they had picked 100 cities across Europe, each one sort of like to cover the different characteristics of cities. So they had a historic city, they had a post-industrial city, which was what Sheffield was. They had, an agriculturally market garden kind of city and all of that. And so we did our bit. We then spent 3 years designing a strategy as to how you would make Sheffield. So this is 1998, 1990. No, 1995 to 1998. Yeah, 1995 to 1998. We came up with a strategy that was how to take Sheffield from where it was to zero carbon. And yeah, we published that. European Union took that away with all the other 99 cities. And again, I was like, yay, that's it. Nailed it. So I've done my research. I've been involved in real research. Now, Sheffield's going to become zero carbon. Woo! Yeah.
And
yeah. And I waited, and here we are. 2 years ago, 2019. So what's that? 23 years later, Sheffield City Council says, oh, John, did you know there's a climate emergency? I'm like, really? Is there? It's like, yes, we're going to say there's a climate emergency. And then a year after that, they said, right, Sheffield's going to go zero carbon by 2030. By 2030. So a mere 32 years after I was one of the many men and women who put together that strategy, we're on the path. So, yeah.
Obviously, I'm imagining it feels good now, maybe, but how has it been through that period where you thought, well, I've got all the answers, let's get on with it, and nothing's happening? How did you deal with that?
I dealt with it by sort of throwing myself. I did other research projects. We did low carbon strategies in China, Germany, low income households. There was loads of other research that we did, all published, for the most part, all ignored. Carried on my research, eventually tried to do a PhD, withdrew from that on energy efficiency and sustainable buildings. Oh, did an MSc in business and commerce and environmental systems, because I was thinking there must be a reason. It's probably got something to do with economics and business. So let me do an economics degree. So I did an MSc in that, as well as my MPhil, started my PhD again, and about 3.5, 4 years, yeah, I gave up. Yeah, right. I gave up.
Okay.
I thought that was it. We were not going to do it.
So did you accept oh, I just can't control this, and therefore, like I've tried, but I can't control the out. You know, I can't come at it from any other direction and just deal with that way, because it must be frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would love to have had my ideas tested. You know, I wouldn't have had a problem if we'd have tried, and it'd be like, yeah, John, we tried what you said, and it didn't work. And that was the tragedy was that every time somebody kind of did something similar to what we had proposed 20 years earlier or whatever, it'd be like, check it out, this really works, it's amazing. And I'd be like, oh, fuck, oh, goodness, you know, and it would be really, really, and that was actually sometimes quite hard. And it seems a bit spiteful, because it's like, that's really great, you've come up with that and everything, and I'm really pleased you're enthusiastic about doing that. But you know, yeah. So that was hard to deal with. But you know, things got worse. It wasn't projections anymore. All the data was coming in. There were some very scary realities, you know, of year after year. There was 2014, which was the warmest year we'd ever recorded. Then 2015, which was the warmest year we'd ever recorded, including 2014. Then 2016, it was still warmer again. And I thought that was it. And this is when it kind of happened. You know, I was like, that's it. We're just on a path. Every year is going to be warmer than the next. I know 3 years is an absolutely not scientific way of going at it, but I just was like, I knew this was going to happen, and this is it. And then 2017 was a little bit cooler, and we thought, oh, there we go. 2018 slightly cooler again, yay! And then 2019 was slightly warmer, and then 2020 is the warmest, equal to the warmest we've ever had, and that's been this period. And you know, in there is the abyss that I looked into. And fundamentally what I did was I designed a zero carbon home that was resilient to a 6-degree global temperature rise. And the plan was I was going to build it in Scotland, hold my family, take them up there, and we were going to enjoy the last years in as comfortable a way as we could. And that was my plan. That was just the most psychotic plan ever, you know, but that was it. That was the best I could come up with.
Yeah, I get that, because armed with this knowledge of where things are going, you wanted to protect your family. So that sounds not a crazy idea. That's so. What does this house look like that's going to be robust?
Oh, it's well, I bore my students with it. I put 10 years of my life into the design of it. It's got every bell and whistle on it, but none of it is innovative. I have to say, it's all invented by other people, which is why I know it's going to work. So what I've done is I've pulled together every good idea of 25 years of studying sustainable homes into one fantastic kind of homogeneous wonder. And it's kind of weird to look at. Some people go, oh, that's a bit unusual, because first of all, it's round.
Nice.
And yeah. Well, my wife said it looks a bit like an armored tower that we've gone to see in a number of our historic. I'm really into medieval history and stuff, and the kids to this day, when we go, oh, there's a castle there, my kids sort of look up and go, oh my, really, Dad? We're going to be, yeah, we are. We're going to go and see it. And so it looks a little like that, but there's a reason why the medieval people built in round towers. Because they're rock hard, they're incredibly structurally stable. And that's, you know, I'm using modern methods to do that. It gets thrown up very quickly. Curved walls, thanks to the Romans, always a challenge, because they decided that square bricks the way to go. The Celts were not into round walls. The Scots were not into square bricks. So the broch, I don't know if you've heard of this, but up in northern Scotland, there are these things called brochs, and they were all built out of stone and circular for the same reason. Ancient Celtic round houses, round because it's super efficient. You've got maximum space to minimum effort. So I started with that, and it was like, yeah, and I know how to build that cheaply, because we're using, and people get a bit twitchy here, it's using cast concrete, but using a super insulated cast concrete, which my estimates are, with the method of concrete that I'm looking at, is maybe 500 years to 1,000 years lifespan on this building. So with nominal maintenance. So that was another thing, that this isn't just for me. This is a generational point. And the roof's 12 tons of cast concrete, no maintenance ever. You know, all you're going to be doing is changing the windows out now and then. And that's it. The thing will just stay. And it's kind of odd in that it's an upside down house. You put your bedrooms on the ground floor, you put your living room on the top. That means if you get flooded, let me tell you, it's a lot easier to carry your clothes upstairs if you're being flooded than it is a chest freezer. And, you know, so having those kind of things upstairs is makes a lot of sense. But also, heat rises, and you tend to want it warmer where you live and cooler where you sleep. So why houses were never built that way? Well, I know why, because people don't like walking upstairs with their shopping. And, you know, it's a, you know, and you get people going, oh, what if somebody breaks in? I don't want to be asleep. And they're breaking into my room. And it's like, you have heard of bungalows, right? You do know that large numbers of people live on a single floor anyway. And secondly, if you think on it, a burglar's like, should I break into that house? Oh my goodness, the people are asleep on the other side of the window I'm breaking into. No, I won't. I'll move on. So actually, statistically, it's a lot safer. So, you know, it does all of these sort of gimmicky things, and that aren't really gimmicks, that are just, and I sort of grasp at 2% here, 5% there, 3% there, you know. And what you end up with is a building that, if it performs the way it should in Scotland, where I want to build it, it will make £5,000 a year of money for me, with the electricity that you sell back to the grid after I've used all my electricity. So it earns me £5,000 a year. Not enough to live on, but enough to reinvest in my house so that all my kit is shiny and new and has got an upgrade program built into it, you know. And that was, so it's like a living thing. It's like growing a fruit tree, where you take the fruit from the tree and it kind of lives. And it lives longer. Well, it lives sort of tree kind of scale, 300 to 500 years minimum of its lifetime. That was the concept to me, you know. And it happened to look over the sea and others on a granite cliff, a stable cliff since the 9th century. So I did do a bit of research on that. So it's 50 meters above sea level, but also with a view over the sea on a granite cliff. So all of these issues, south facing, granite cliffs, water supply locally, you know, high wind regime. The house itself is designed to take a category 5, walk through a category 5 hurricane. It would 280 mile an hour, 300 mile an hour winds, not touch this structure. Temperature comfortable down to minus 30, and I think it will stay stable up to plus 40 internal temperature, not vary, maybe 5 or 6 degrees over a year with those kind of temperatures. Yeah. So yeah, I would like to build. And it does cost a bit to build, 250,000 to build, which is above the average. Well, no, it's not. It's actually comes in at about the average house price, but you do have to buy your land on top of that, don't you? Which is why I'm building in Scotland.
And apart from obviously the land, what's the main cost, if you like? Or is it just lots of...
It's a house. It's just a house.
Just everything.
It's just a house. You just got to design everything in, and there's no part of the house that does just one thing. So this is the kind of gimmick to it. So the roof makes you strong against the wind, but it's also what I capture all my rainwater for my food, my water, my potable water. Mm-hmm. So it's my rainwater collection system. It's got sort of coated in a special sort of chemical material that means that it doesn't leach stuff don't collect water off most types of concrete. It can be toxic over time. So you've got to think about all of these kind of things. But anyway, it collects my rainwater, my sun space on the front of the house, keeps me warm, grow my plants, got my solar panels embedded into the roof. Everything meshes into everything else. It's not, you see a lot of houses now where they've got the kit kind of bolted on, like it's like an afterthought. Mm-hmm. And it's because I suppose the designers of it, they're architects or they're engineers or their thingy. Because I don't fit into any of these boxes, I just had to mash it all up. And also I'm a tight Yorkshireman, and I value engineered everything. So, the rainwater, I wanted 6 months of water storage, and that came to quite a lot of water. So I wanted to engineer it so just in case it didn't rain for 6 months. And that was quite a bit of that needed quite a large tank. And my wife, she would be a cetacean. She would be a beautiful dolphin or something in another life, and she just loves to swim. When we go to the seaside, she's like, "Oh, I'll see you," and she's away, and she's in the water, no matter what the time of year is or whatever. So she loves to swim and everything, and she's always got a wetsuit in there, and she just loves it. And the way I sold this new house to her is like, I thought, oh, if I make the water tank twice as big as it needs to be, that's great, but it becomes a swimming pool. And so I'm selling it to her as a swimming pool. But it turns out a British company about 10 years ago now invented a freshwater swimming pool. So they'd use biofiltration, and you can put potable, you can drink. We went to one of these swimming pools that they built in the UK. And the guy who took us around took a glass with him and went, "Do you want to try some?" And he just scooped into the swimming pool and he gave me a glass of this water. Honestly, it tasted delicious. It tasted nice, not bland And I was like, so we got a freshwater swimming pool that we heat, but it's also our water store. It's also our thermal store, so it keeps the house at a stable temperature because water doesn't change. So all of these gimmicks things are sort of mashed in, and I bore my students for quite a few hours on all the nuanced. This is where we get our water from. This is where we treat our sewage. But also this is where we live our lives. That, you've got this beautiful swimming pool that is somewhere to sit, somewhere to be as well. That it's not just all engineering and everything. And my wife, as well as being a dolphin, is also a really keen artist and interior designer. So I was hoping that she would make it look absolutely beautiful as well, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but when you build a house for yourself, at one point in the construction process, you can claim back your VAT.
Right.
So you're allowed to claim your VAT back just once.
Okay.
And so the later you wait to claim your VAT back, the more money you get. And so the idea is we would finish the construction and then we'd claim our VAT, and that's how much she'd have to do the interiors. So she was like that. So that way she wouldn't want. She'd want to wait as long as possible for before we sort of do that aspect, so she'd get the most amount of money. But she was so excited about doing that as well. So yeah, it's about a home as much as it is an engineering project, which was very important to me. That it's got to be somewhere where you'd want to live, as well as it making you $5,000 a year, which is nice.
Sure, it sounds like you, as you said earlier, that you have taken all the bits of useful information that you've acquired over the time about making this unbelievably self-contained, resilient house. Is this something that could be? Does it have to be a one-off, or could other people do this?
Yeah. My hope was that it would be. Well, I had these grand plans 10 years ago before I lost it. That I would leave the university, maybe work one day a week there, and actually go into building these houses. But sadly, I just didn't have the resources to. It was going to cost every penny that we'd earned throughout our entire lives 5 years ago to build it. And then, even though I picked a location that already had planning permission for a house, the planning procedures had changed. And get this, even though the house is designed to be unscathed by a 1.5 meter flood, the fact that there was a 1 in 200 year chance of there being a 30 centimeter flood, they turned me down on the planning. And they literally, in the appeal, the Environment Agency went, I saw that it was really resilient to flooding. I really look forward to seeing the build when it's built in an area that isn't in a flood risk. That literally, that's in the report, in the writing up of the report. So, that's an interesting point in terms of, I get why the Environment Agency wants to protect people from flooding, because there is a lot of millions of people in the UK that are struggling with this. But this house would have actually shown you a model how to build houses for the same price as a normal build that would be resilient to 1.5 meters flooding, which I thought would have been worth a punt anyway. But no.
It's curious because we all see houses that are built on floodplains. So how does that work?
I don't know. I think they've got better lawyers than me.
Right.
These are large organisations that are doing, whereas I was on my own.
Yeah.
All right, I've got 25 years of experience in building resilient houses, but they just don't believe me. They just didn't believe me. Nobody believed me. So people don't believe what I say. They just say, "No, John, that sounds too good to be true." When I say, well, I built the first autonomous, I was involved. I didn't build it. I was involved in the first autonomous house build 20 years ago. And there've been people living in those for 20 years now. And the temperature in the house has never gone above 25 and never gone below 18, except when family went on holiday for 6 months. And it's me able to keep it that. And a yearly bill for those houses is about 30 quid.
Wow.
And that's 20 years old. That's 20 years. And I still take my students to see those houses now. Yeah. They're over in Hockerton in near Newark. And they, yeah. And when we were involved in that, we were absolutely confident that, once people get to see this, and this is a volume house building method, these houses cost 80k each to build. So they come in at the standard build price for a 3-bedroom house. When Barratt or Simon or whatever build their houses, they usually build for about 80k for a 3-bedroom house. So these come in at that's how much they cost to build. The rest is land value and profit. So which land value has just gone insane over the recent years, but that's how much it does. So those were designed to deliver at that. They were designed as bungalows for lifetime homes. So no matter what your age, you can do that. Very low energy, very healthy, very high air quality, and could be built at extraordinary densities. But because they're what we call berm houses, so those are houses that are actually covered in soil, you can't see them from the air. You can't see them from the air, which is weird. But here's the fun bit. You can ram the houses in layers, in rows, front to back. And all you see of the house row in front of you is a slight inclined grass verge or fruit trees, which what we plant on them usually. So you can just see all these fruit trees and everything in front of you. And then that's a row of houses. And then they do the same. So it's a better place to live. This is not just about, let's design some middle class tosh that, yes, it's eco, it's eco, like let's be vegan and not eat dairy and be really holier than thou. And even though I don't eat dairy and I try not to eat meat, and that's not my agenda. That really isn't. It's not about, because I grew up in a council estate, and there are other things like people dying because they can't afford to eat their home, or dying because they've got black mold, or suffering from asthma because the air quality in their houses are just awful. And I can deliver that for the same price as a normal house. And it makes me, the closest word to it is probably rage. That's the closest I can think of that I can sort of say on your lovely podcast. But that's the closest to it. And all the associated responses that go with rage. In fact, there's a poster behind me that says, non-violent, and that's one of the reasons, is because I get so angry. Sometimes I need to just take a breath and look around and go, the best chance of success is non-violent action. There is no value in violence, even though that might feel good for a second. And
sure.
It's my dad was a straight-talking guy, military guy, and perhaps we had these conversations, and we perhaps were more right-wing in our attitudes towards solutions than supposed middle-class people were. I don't know. It's a debate that I'm happy to have.
I can see that perhaps I was going to say the climate inappropriately.
No, that
out there at the moment, there isn't the desire for perhaps us going as far as that and thinking, this is the way we want to live. But I feel like we might be moving towards that, but there may be just being a sort of thinking that this is going to be the optimistic decade in which things will change. What about those people that want to make changes in a home that that isn't efficient or wasn't built with those sorts of premises? Can people make changes in their home that they're in rather than wonder how they can get in a home that does all those things?
They better.
Yes. Yes,
I mean,
of course.
the interesting point, interesting, by interesting I mean oh my god, we're all going to die, interesting, is that we have to have cut our carbon emissions by around 40% by the end of this decade to have, get this, a 50-50 chance to not initiate cascade events. And by those, I'm meaning sort of like an ongoing warming of the planet or change in our climate that we can't stop.
Yeah.
So there's a toss of the coin chance of doing that if we don't drop our carbon emissions by 50%. And I don't know about you, I've got kids, I've got a 21-year-old and a 17-year-old. And the idea of getting a revolver out and filling 3 chambers in of that revolver, spinning it up and putting it to my daughter's head, which is what people are asking me to do if we only reduce carbon by 40%, well, that word rage springs to mind again, and so the estimates are that about 8 out of 10, somewhere between 7 or 8 out of 10 of the houses standing in 2050, not 2030, 2050 are currently built. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a lot of adaptation going on.
Yeah, and this is one of currently a real serious research field that I'm doing. I'm speaking at the CIAT, it's a architectural technology accredited group on next Wednesday, and they want to know about retrofit strategies. What can we do? Because the government quite recently gave £5,000 that you could apply for, 10,000 if you're on low income, to improve your home.
Yeah.
You may have seen that, the Future Homes Grant, I think it was called. What a hokum that was! It just £5,000, really £5,000. That
not going to cut it.
It's not blowing my skirt up. Let me tell you, that I would, if you want it done right, if you want a zero carbon house, when only 1/10 of 1%, and that might be improving on now, but I'm pretty confident that figure's right. 1/10 of 1% are you aware that all houses come with a fridge rating and energy performance certificate when you sell it? Mm-hmm. So A to G. If you finish a building to building regs now, that's a high C or a low B. Mm-hmm. That's what it comes in at. Okay. So if you build to building regs at the moment, that's what you come in at. If you push it a bit harder, you can be a good B. One of my students is currently doing a fantastic dissertation. She works in practice. She's a part-time student, and her construction company wanted to build A certificate houses in their new estate, but decided that the cost to the benefit wasn't worth it, and so they came in at B plus, just on the borderline of that. And so we currently enjoy only 1%, 1/10 of 1% of our housing stock is A.
Right. That's not a very big figure, is it?
Yeah, A is, so it's 1 in 1,000. Yeah, 1 in 1,000 houses. I think that's what it means. 1 in 1,000 houses. And A isn't zero carbon.
Okay.
So A's not even it. A doesn't even do it. And yet and now we're going to ask to push 7 out of 10 of our current houses in our current housing stock, push not to A, but beyond A. Now, we have a little bit of a get-out clause in that if the government does what it says it's going to do and totally decarbonizes our electrical supply, if they make our entire electrical supply renewable in one way or another, then if we make our houses all electric, then on paper our houses are zero carbon. Yeah.
Okay.
Could be as simple as switching over to electricity in our homes. But if we do that without improving the efficiency of our homes, the amount of fuel poverty we will create in that process, because of course electricity is quite expensive, and it's quite expensive to heat our homes using electricity. that fills me with dread as well. So you have to bring down that amount of energy that you need to heat your homes. And it's isn't like I described earlier, it's possible in a new build to build a house that is calling something zero heating is a bit of a challenge, because you might need 2 weeks of the year where you might need a little fan heater running, or a candle, literally. This granny that I interviewed for research about 10 years ago, she was living in this super insulated block of flats. The Newark County Council had refitted this block of flats, and they'd made it super insulation. And I talked to her, and I think she was called Mabel. It was just like she was a stereotype wrapped in a cliche. She was just cute. She was about 4 foot. She came in and was like, "John, I've got some cake." And it was like, "Oh my God, you're my gran." And she brought me in, and she was like, fed me cake and tea throughout our interview. And I was talking to her, "So what's it like living here?" She said, "Oh, it's great, John. I love it. And in the winter, they tell me that I'm allowed to have some heating on, but I've realized all I've got to do," and remember this is 10 years ago, "I changed my light bulb," and she pointed at her main light that she used in her house. And then she took out this 60-watt old tungsten bulb. And she said, "I just change it with this, and it keeps my whole house, my whole flat warm. That's what does it. And I don't need to worry about it anymore." And I was like, oh my goodness, you've just nailed it. This whole idea that, that you're not supposed to use tungsten light bulbs because they're really inefficient, because about 80% of the electricity gets turned into heat. But she'd worked it out, and she was like, "Oh, I'll just do that. Then I don't need to think about heating because it just keeps an house." And, what we're asking for here is not a massive shift in how people live. If Mabel can manage it in her early 80s, then we can all manage living in it. If you're living in a house that's well designed, it's relatively easy. No heating system, no technology, no Hive on your flipping phone, and no complexity, because the house just remains the same temperature all year round, just because it's designed that way. And that, rather than having, because I teach engineers, and they love the kit, don't they? They let's put a heat pump in there, let's put some solar panels, let's do it's like, how about we design a house that doesn't need any of that? How about we do that? And they'd be like, "Ooh, John, are you sure?" So if you can, I'm a great believer of the KISS principle. I always get the mantra is, keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid, because we've got to roll this out to everybody, not to some eco warriors like you or I, who'd be like, "Oh yeah, taking the internal and external temperature every day. Yeah, I'd really be happy doing that." Would you really? I'm not sure if you would. Sorry, I've gone on.
No, it's fine. What would be the first thing that people could do then that would be most useful? Is there any?
I get asked this all the time.
Yeah.
And every time I'm like, "Oh, thanks." No, not at all. Because every time I do it, it forces me to think about it. It used to be loft insulation, easy to do, relatively cheap, and you can buy the insulation from a company that I happen to be director of that is recycled cotton insulation called Innertherm. There we go.
Oh.
Bit of a plug.
Excellent. Okay.
It's actually 4 times more expensive than the cheapest insulation on the market, because it's the lowest carbon and uses entirely recycled material. So probably you won't. but it's even lower carbon than sheep's wool, which most people know about but don't think about. But anyway, that used to be my thing, because I was like, "Oh, Innertherm, I do that," and it's like, and then people would say, "But I've already got insulation." So now it's changed. Now what everybody needs to do is have a house plan. So you assess your house, you look at your house as it is now, and then you look at your house as it would perhaps look as a zero carbon house. And you put the thought in to both of those houses. You do the energy assessment, get advice on how to do it, and then you push it, and you think, what has the house got to look like to be zero carbon? And that is your house plan. And that house plan might live for 20, 30 years. And every time you think, "Oh, we've got a bit of extra money, what shall we do?" And it's like, let's get the house plan out. Yeah. Open it up and say, how much money have we got? We go down our different choices of options. They start at 0, which you should have already done. For goodness sake, do them now. And it goes all the way down to 13 grand, 14 grand for a heat pump, maybe, at the bottom. And you're, what should we spend? But what you don't do is you don't go cheap and go halfway.
Right.
Because what you end up doing with that is you can't go back to it. So let's say you think, let's replace the windows, and you replace them with double glazed windows, and you go, I don't quite have the 12 grand for triple glazed windows. Let's go double glazed and good quality and locally made and all of this kind of stuff. And right, that's it. You've done it. You've now sterilized your windows. You will never spend that money again. Certainly not on a triple glazed window, because your double glazed windows are okay. But now you can't reach zero carbon. Now you can't. You sterilized your house. You can't reach zero carbon now because you didn't know. And nobody should blame you for not knowing, but you should know, because somebody should be telling you. A loudmouth frog like me should be saying, the first thing you should do is have a house plan, and let's have a website that says, this is how you do your house plan. In fact, I have a plan how to roll this out, and it's again self-promotion here. I'm halfway through my How to Survive a Zombie Apocalypse book, and you'd be like, "What, John? You were talking about houses?" yeah. This is it. And what it does is it outlines how to retrofit your house for long-term survival in a zombie apocalypse, and it's a bit of a joke. But it turns out the same strategies that you'd employ to live after society has collapsed, supposedly, in the zombie apocalypse, are the technologies that you'd employ to make your house zero carbon. And so it's supposed to be like a fun, tongue-in-cheek way of introducing sustainable house construction strategies, which literally, when I said that to you, I saw your eyes glaze just slightly. Because that is the most boring term ever. On Coronation Street or EastEnders, do they ever go, well, how's your solar panels doing on your roof? Or I've heard you thinking about increasing the amount of loft insulation. No, you don't. Whereas it'd be like, freezing in the winter, zombies outside. How do we survive that? It's kind of my gimmick. So I'm hoping to roll that out, and and it'll actually be all the technology in it will be valid. So I'm hoping that it might even get sort of adopted by technology courses in universities and stuff, that, it's just maybe the students will read it if it's underpinned with this humor.
I think you make a really good point there, that it's making it accessible. It's making it mean something to everyone, so that they switch on and go, okay, I want to hear more about that. So, if it takes a zombie apocalypse, then go for it, is what I would say.
I mean, you can use any dystopian collapse, I mean, I was thinking about pandemic, and thank goodness I didn't, because, that would have really been inappropriate, and I would have had to change it. So that's why, and I wish, again, I could say, I wish it was my idea, but there's the American emergency organization. Oh my goodness, what are they called now? It's just slipped my mind. They do all the disaster relief, hurricane relief. Anyway, you go on the website for emergencies, and they have loads of tabs like tornado risk, hurricane risk, flood risk, all of these. And right at the bottom, there's zombie apocalypse. And you click on it, and it tells you about having a bug out bag, having food for 3 days, making sure you've got water. It's actually exactly the same of what is a hurricane risk preparation, but they've just put it in, and again, they've just repackaged it. And of course, the kids, when they're looking at it, go, oh my God, let's look at that. And it's like, and I went, oh my goodness, that's really good for disaster relief. But I've got an idea where I could use that. So once again, John has not had an innovative idea in his life.
We do not have time to be reinventing the wheel. If there is good ideas out there, it's just about dispersing them and trying to get them utilised. And if you're part of that, then I think you need to be kind to yourself, John. Look, I'm looking at the time, and we are definitely running out. So where did that go?
No, we'll have to come back. I've
You
got
can
so much more to say.
Yes, I'm absolutely sure you will come back. But as we come to a close for this particular episode, I'm going to finish with because I have two questions in mind, and one of which you've already answered. But the last one is, okay, we've got to 2050. What does your world look like? You hope that it looks like.
Well, there's two. There's a fork in the road at the moment. There's a fork in the road at the moment, and one of them is oh my goodness, it's the shiny one. It's just like we walk forwards and people don't die in the winter because they can't afford to heat their homes because their houses just run, and people grow local food and they know each other because there's an allotment that's run by the community, and the kids are really grumpy because they're forced to work there, but secretly they kind of like it because, you know, and people work locally, and they do Zoom calls when they do that, and they every so often they build up their carbon credit so they can go abroad on an airship. Oh my goodness, you know, and that's a British made airship which will take you serenely across to somewhere beautiful and sunny and everything, and maybe you can, when you absolutely need a car, you can open your phone and you can say, "Hi, Johnny Cabs, can you just send me a car? I need it to carry my luggage from IKEA because I've just bought a whole load of stuff and I've just bussed it here, and it's got to be big enough to put my bike in the back of it, as well as, you know, and Johnny Cabs will turn up with a big car," and all of that, and a government that doesn't really exist in a form that we recognise, because we have citizens' assemblies where groups of individuals sit down together and agree difficult problems, and rather than worrying about whether they're going to get elected in 4 or 5 years, it's like, what do we want the future to look like? That's what we want the future to look like, and they all agree, and it's a proper democracy, and humans are actually engaged in that politics, and oh damn, that sounds great, doesn't it? I literally had tingles just run down my back, you know. That's the one fork. Yeah.
Should we not talk about the other fork?
Well, the other one is 3 million dead or dying. Our coastal cities are lost. Millions are moving from those inland, but are being pushed back by countries and people inland because they've got nothing. They've got less than nothing. And so they can't think of bringing any more people to that. And so conflict and violence abounds. The temperature and the weather are extremes. We regularly get along the equator a wet bulb temperature above body temperature. So you're outside for more than 2 or 3 hours and you can't find yourself a body of water or an air-conditioned building. You just die. So, you know, Africa's got a lot less people in it than it has at the moment. We're desperately trying to grow food under glass in our northern hemisphere to feed people. We can do it, but damn, it's nasty. You know, it's we can feed people on algae and seaweed, which actually is quite nice. Actually, I take it back. But, you know, mass-produced indoor underground agriculture, it's got the calories, but it's not what I want. You know, and people, there's no democracy at all. It's just being given up because there's so much violence and so much pressure on people just to live. And, you know, so we've given up just so much. And people, and the worst bit of that fork is that everybody will still be alive and look back and say, yeah, didn't we talk about this sort of 30 years ago when I was a kid? What did our parents, did they know? Did they know? And for me, looking back, somehow as a sort of 80, 90-year-old man, I don't know if I'll be able to lift my head at that point, you know, because I knew, and you know, and that's a horrible path. But I fear it has to be one or the other. I'm not sure if there's a middle path.
Yeah.
That's the bit that scares me. That, you know, if you're not on option A, the lovely one, you inevitably reach option B at some point. It's not that you can run somewhere continuously between the two. because the system's changing, you are forced into option 2. And that terrifies me. Sorry to be so down.
No.
The shiny alien is great, though.
Yeah, well, it's being able to face the reality, and then also being able to come back from it and think, okay, what can I do? And and know that you can't fix it all. You can do your little bit, and hopefully everyone else will do their bit too.
They will.
Yes.
I feel that, once they know that there's an option, the problem is I don't think people know what I want. I don't want people to wear sackcloth and smear ashes on their face. I want them to be shiny and educated and healthy, and oh my goodness, that's what I want. I want a beautiful world. I even, I'm one of the few people that's not angry at Elon Musk for going to Mars. I kind of love pushing humanity to the bleeding edge of our technology and our advancement as well. I do not want to be living off the land and hunter-gatherer. Some of my friends who are vegans and stuff, they kind of have a really passive way of looking at life. And I'm afraid I'm a bit of a technologist. I'm a guy. Guys are just in love with kit and technology and everything. But I want it where it's appropriate.
Mm.
I don't think there's appropriate. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going on again.
Thank you so much, John. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here, really, talking about possible futures, future worlds, science fiction. It's cool. Science fact or faction, science faction, whatever you can think of a word.
Thank you. Wow. I hope you enjoyed this first episode as much as I did. I so appreciated John providing us with an insight into what a zero carbon home could look like. You can find links to John on my podcast page at www.theowlhoot.com/podcast. I'd like to give thanks to Jeremy Jones for the music and to you for listening. If you want to hear more stories of people doing great things that positively impact our environment, then please do subscribe, rate and review through your podcast app. And why not share this episode with someone you think might enjoy it? In the next episode, I talk to Anne-Marie McMillan, founder and manager of the Derbyshire Toy Libraries, on borrowing toys and running a toy library. Until next time, bye for now.